Welcome to Live Oak Unitarian Universalist Congregation on this beautiful fall morning. It's wonderful to see your beautiful faces. At this time of year, on the eve of our official Thanksgiving, we encourage one another to reflect upon and express what we are grateful for. I believe it's safe to say that most of us in this room feel tremendous gratitude to have found Live Oak and to be a part of this amazingly warm and welcoming community. A community that provides a safe and sacred space for each to travel our own unique spiritual path, to figure out life's lessons and meanings, to hold us during life's twists and turns, milestones and difficulties. This morning, our worship service will be delivered by our Ministerial student intern, Lora Barnett. Also, Reverend Tamara Casanova Suzuki is with us this morning, and she will be conducting our new member welcome a little bit later in the service.
Good morning. It is good to be together. Our call to worship this morning is from Barbara Walker, and it goes like this. Thousands of years history have passed, and during all that time, human beings have fought, killed, plundered, and wronged each other in every possible way. Of such stuff, our history is made. But also during that time, other human beings have quietly and patiently persevered in the development of the arts, crafts, inventions, ideas, and justice work. And from these millions of creative persons, most of them unnoticed and unknown in the upheavals of history, have come the good and lasting things in the sum of human culture. Let us remember in this time of worship which part of humanity we wish to partake of. I invite you now to settle into your chair, maybe adjust your feet so they're both on the ground if that's comfortable for you. So we may enter into a time of meditation, reflection, and prayer. This is a prayer that was posted by Jessica York, the UUA Faith Development Director, this week in response to all that is in our culture right now. I invite you now into this time of prayer. This is not a prayer that you may find hope, for hope is a luxury that some cannot find and others cannot afford. This is not a prayer that you find more love in the world, though I hope you continue to feel love and send love to those near and far. I pray instead that you may find tools, a hammer half hidden in the grass, a roll of duct tape curled up and forgotten on a high shelf in the back of the closet, a wrench poking out of the back pocket of a stranger. Take these tools and gird thyself, a hammer for justice, duct tape to hold together your broken heart, a wrench to, quote, grip and provide advantage in applying torque to turn objects, unquote, or turn the world. Take these tools and others you may find in places expected and unexpected. Take these tools and gird thyself, for weeping may last through the night, but the work begins in the morning. Join me now in a time of silence. Amen. So for those of you that read the Acorn a few weeks ago, and then you read the Acorn this week, you'll notice that what I had planned to preach on and what I'm actually preaching on is a little different. And I've been told that's called ministerial prerogative. So last Wednesday, well, 2 Wednesdays ago now, 2 Wednesdays ago when I woke up to a new reality in which Donald Trump was our new president-elect, I had a hard time processing that information being a liberal Unitarian Universalist Ministerial student intern. And when I read the election results and realized that it was white people predominantly who elected Trump, I had an even harder time processing that. But when my friend and colleague in seminary, Dorcia, who is a United Methodist minister in Kansas, told me that her church had been vandalized twice in the last week, I stopped resisting that new reality. My ministry suddenly and quite distinctly became real in a whole new way. I knew when I started this call to ministry that it was a call to love and to serve and to lead. And I knew that each of these entailed some level of risk. And last week, that risk sat heavy in my heart. It seemed that all that we hold dear as Unitarian Universalists was under siege. And I have found myself in the week following the election seeking to build my courage and my commitment for the journey ahead. It seems to me that we have forgotten what it means to be human. That somehow in between a 24-hour news cycle and our most recent post on Facebook, that we have forgotten that we are more than our various identities. Our identities, whatever they may be, mother, sister, friend, cyclist, cookie maker, Unitarian Universalist, those are all part of what makes us who we are and connects us to the people that we care about. They give us our sense of belonging, of meaning, and of purposeful action. But it seems that at times we forget that underneath those identities, beloved as they are, that we are first and foremost human beings. One of my professors at ILIF, Dr. Edward Antonio, who teaches theological anthropology, which is a very fancy word, I know, has said time and again that when we forget how to be human, when we place our identities above our humanity, there is no telling what horror may be released. And Dr. Antonio, as a native of Zimbabwe, knows firsthand the risks of identity-driven politics. Most of us know that hate crimes have surged these past 2 weeks. We cannot go on like this. There are too many bodies already involved, too many bodies already in harm's way. So we need to do the hard work of grappling with the ways in which our identities may get in the way of our shared humanity. And that means talking about the ways in which identities are used to privilege some bodies at the expense of other bodies. And that means owning our own privilege, looking it straight in the face and coming to terms with it. Now, of course, none of us is 100% privileged. And none of us is 100% marginalized. That connection point between the two of marginalization and of privilege is generally referred to in theological circles as intersectionality, and I won't bore you with the details of that. But basically, it's an idea that our identities, our humanity is multifaceted. and that we are called to be gentle with one another in that complexity. And yet, it is an inescapable truth that at the end of the day, some bodies pay a much higher price than others. So it seems the best place to start is for me to own my own privilege. I am white, and I am cisgendered. If you don't know what cisgendered means, it means basically that my gender expression matches my gender orientation. I have 2 healthy children, I drive a minivan, I often listen to NPR, and I drink fair trade coffee. I buy organic food as much as I can. I am beyond college educated. I am a US citizen, and I am almost a Unitarian Universalist minister. With all of those privileges, I walk freely in the world. Yes, some aspects of my identity are marginalized. I have known my share of harassment. All women have. And as a result, I have learned the ways to protect myself in a world that is not safe for women. But mostly, I enjoy an incredibly high level of economic, political, and social freedom. And that can sometimes blind me to the suffering of others because their suffering is simply not part of my experience. It can be difficult to adjust our frame of reference, to step back and to notice the ways in which our privilege may unwittingly impact another person. But it is essential. It's essential if we believe and wish to engage in liberative justice that we do this work. Privilege and oppression are embedded in our systems of governance, our systems of social interaction, and our education systems. And unraveling this is going to take a lot of courage, has taken a lot of courage already for many generations of civil rights and other freedom fighters. And it is a collective action that can really only be undertaken in community. And there's no better place to do that than here, in this community. We have been working for a long time as a community on social justice issues. And this winter, our Social Justice Committee will be inviting us to go deeper into this work of privilege and identity and oppression and marginalization. So as you listen this morning, know that there is more coming, more support, more resources, more opportunities for reflection and for action. We got each other. And let's let that be enough for today. In her book, The 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life, Karen Armstrong writes that we have 2 brains. Our first brain is our brainstem, and it is reptilian, instinctual, protective, judgmental, and tribal. And within our primal brain system, we are subject to the 4 F's. These 4 F's are feeding, fighting, fleeing, and reproduction. Each of these has been known to cause, I hate being a redhead because it makes me blush. Each of these has been known to cause us to make poor choices or otherwise act badly from time to time. Our primal brain is a place we go to when we are frightened, angry, grieving, or otherwise hurting. And our primal brain is quite useful in alerting us to danger. For example, if a tiger were to walk in, our primal brain would be very useful in protecting us. However, as we all know, there are few tigers in North America these days. The primary tigers or threats in our lives here in 2016 are complex, nuanced ideas such as globalization, pernicious capitalism, and climate change. And our primal brain is very poor at sizing up those nuanced sorts of threats. Our primal brain knows only how to sort friend from foe, and does so in chillingly racist, sexist, and bigoted ways. It is a quick start system. And so all of the privilege and oppression that is embedded in us through our culture just comes right out in that moment. Luckily, we have a second brain. As humans, we also have a neocortex. It's larger, it's gray, it's full of wrinkles and folds, and it holds complexity and nuance quite well. Our neocortex is capable of overriding those 4 F's. Our neocortex gives rise to such qualities as altruism and compassion. And when we act from our neocortex, we create beauty, community, blessing, connection, joy. So as a result, we are wired for both compassion and for cruelty. And Karen Armstrong writes that this is both the blessing and the challenge of our humanity, for we may and we must choose which brain we will cultivate. This last election cycle was one of the more fear-based, angry, and vitriol-filled cycles in modern history. And it could be argued that last week, the primal brain won the election. That we have elected in Donald Trump a man who is run almost entirely by his primal brain. I think we all saw evidence of the 4 F's in his behavior and his speech. And this is what makes Trump and the people that he is appointing to his cabinet so dangerous to our democracy. For the primal brain does not care about civil liberties. The primal brain does not care that threatening to build a wall or detain and track Muslims puts real people in danger. The primal brain has only its tunnel vision and cares only about the safety of whomever it deems to be within its own tribe. And the tribe that elected Donald Trump last week was predominantly white. Angry, fearful, and white. And I know it's uncomfortable to sit in your own skin if you have some white blood in your veins and sit with that. I know it's uncomfortable. But sit with it we must. We know from history that this brand of tribal white nationalism is lethal to anyone who is not white, not male, not cisgendered, not straight, or anyone who stands in the way of that ideology. And that is where we stand as Unitarian Universalists. We are, as Unitarian Universalists, called to grapple with our own personal and collective identities, and we are called to stand in the way of hate. And we will. Of that I have no doubt. But before we jump in and start marching, a moment of caution. We each hold privilege and oppression within ourselves. And while we are predominantly white as a denomination, we are not universally so. Thus, we are called to be gentle with one another. Our identities also as Unitarian Universalists are complex as a movement. We have, as a movement, not always shown up as well as we might have. While much of our history demonstrates a courageous commitment to justice, our history also demonstrates that we have been complicit in racist, sexist, and bigoted ideologies. We are called to be reflective on this. Okay, take a deep breath. Last November, I had the opportunity of traveling to Zimbabwe and South Africa with my theological school. And the purpose of this trip was to explore social justice in a global context, such that we, as seminarians might better understand our role in combating injustice in the world. Our group was about half African American and half white, with one biracial woman who happened to be my roommate. We were led by a team of professors from Iliff School of Theology, 2 of whom were native Black Zimbabweans. Toward the end of our trip, we spent time in Johannesburg, South Africa, and spent a day at the Apartheid Museum. Some of you may have been there, and if you have been there, you know that it is a very challenging museum to go through. 2 things became very clear to me that day. One thing that I observed throughout my time in South Africa was that South Africans are far better at confronting their racist past than most North Americans. Most Blacks and whites in South Africa speak openly and with great intelligence, insight, and awareness of their past. They are not afraid to grapple with the ugliness of white supremacy. Rather, I watched time and time again as they lived intentionally into the pain of their past and worked together for reconciliation, in the hope that by doing so, they might work out their own sense of grace. The second thing that I confronted that day was my own racial identity as white. I became aware of just how deep white racial identity runs in my blood. And I cried. I cried for the horror of it, and I raged at the ugliness of the racial bigotry that was depicted and chronicled. But mostly, I was utterly silent. And I would like to invite you into that silence for the next few minutes by sharing with you some of the pictures that our group took that day. For I think that these images communicate far more powerfully than any words might. I'll quote. In the white community, the path to a more perfect union means acknowledging that what ails the African American community does not just exist in the minds of Black people. The legacy of discrimination and current incidents of discrimination must be addressed, not just with words, but with deeds. All Americans must realize that your dreams do not have to come at the expense of my dreams, that investing in the health, welfare, education of Black, brown, and white children will ultimately help all of America prosper. Let us find that common stake we all have in one another and let our politics reflect that spirit as well." Unquote. From President Barack Obama, March 2008. The prophetic words of President Barack Obama speak powerfully and truthfully that things are not as they should be and haven't been. And yet his message of hope calls us powerfully forth to be part of the community that brings justice, compassion, and love to the forefront of our political and social systems. Let us do our part. Let us do our part to confront in ourselves the ways in which privilege and oppression harm us and one another, steal the speech, and make impossible the way to justice. Let us do that work together so that the suffering may be lessened in the world. So I'll leave you with this question this morning. Are you ready? We are being called to look into the face of privilege. Called to look into the face of the marginalized, be it in ourselves and one another. And this is difficult, complex work, but it's worth doing. And I'm hoping that we will do it together now and in the years to come. Are you ready? If you think you might be ready, or you are ready, I just invite you, just place your hand over your heart. You don't have to take any other action today. Just maybe thinking about being ready. And just breathe. I have faith in you. You are enough. We are enough. And we can do this work together. We have two brains. We are capable of taking responsibility for our reactions and cultivating our capacity to respond with compassion rather than fear. The choice is ours. And our choices will shape the future of our world and determine whether or not the arc of history bends towards justice or terror. May it be so. May it be so. May it be so. As we extinguish our chalice, our time of worship comes to a close, and our time of service truly begins. I offer you a blessing for the journey by Rilke. I always say it wrong. You who let yourselves feel, enter the breathing. You who let yourselves feel, enter the breathing. Enter the breathing that is more than your own. Let it brush your cheeks as it divides and rejoins behind you. Blessed ones, whole ones, you where the heart begins. You are the bow that shoots the arrows, and you are the target. Fear not. Fear not the pain. Let its weight fall back into the earth. For heavy are the mountains and heavy are the seas. The trees you planted in childhood have grown. They have grown too heavy and you cannot bring them along. Give yourselves to the air, to all that you cannot hold. Just breathe. May the light of love be upon you. May you go forth today in a spirit of joy and of blessing and of readiness for the work ahead. Blessed be.